Going back to the very beginning of the MCU, we have a keystone event, and that event is Tony Stark becoming Iron Man. He's forced to build these weapons for an organization, and that organization was the Ten Rings.
Welcome back, everyone. This is my full Shang-Chi movie review that's finally releasing it around the world. Hopefully you've had a chance to see it. If not, I recommend you go check it out. I will also be doing full Easter egg breakdowns, post-credit scene videos the next couple of days too. So if you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe to get all those. For those of you that are huge martial arts movie fans and you're really bummed out by what they did with Iron Fist, the Shang-Chi movie is a giant step in the correct direction, and it's basically the beginning of this giant new franchise in a direction that Marvel has never gone before. I've made the Black Panther movie comparison before, whereas that movie sort of set up this whole new area inside the MCU, this whole new mythology that wasn't anything like any of the other Marvel movies that had come before. So even though he's going to eventually cross over with the Avengers as they sort of tease through the course of the film, I'll explain that in a second too. They actually do a really good job of asking a bunch of questions during the film that you are excited to watch them answer in future sequels. They answer most of the big questions that they raise during the film, like the biggest things about his character. Where does he come from? How do his powers work? What's going on with the Mandarin? How do these characters connect with the rest of the Marvel films? But also at the same time raise a couple other big questions that they won't answer till they get to the second film. Kevin Feige has already said that they have a lot of ideas where that's going to pick up, but they haven't given any kind of release date to that yet. And whereas the Black Widow movie dealt with a little bit of Marvel Phase 4 stuff, like the Black Widow post-credit scene was a Marvel Phase 4 scene because there's a huge time jump at the end of the movie till after Avengers Endgame. And even though Spider-Man Far From Home actually takes place after Shang-Chi in the timeline of Marvel movies, so it should be a Marvel Phase 4 film, that was really more of an epilogue the way they build it for Avengers Endgame in all the Marvel Phase 3 stuff. So Shang-Chi takes place before the events of Spider-Man Far From Home, but it actually feels like a genuine Marvel Phase 4 movie where everything is new and it's pushing the plot forward in Marvel Phase 4 the way you would expect a Marvel movie to do. And if there was confusion about when this does take place in the timeline, it does take place after the events of Avengers Endgame, like a good while after Endgame, after things have chilled out, life has gotten back to normal, around the time I would say Falcon and Winter Soldier is happening, but before the events of Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man No Way Home, because you do see the Sanctum during the movie, and it's not covered in snow, and Wong isn't talking about it or addressing any kind of issues that are happening at the Sanctum. So clearly, whatever's happening at the Sanctum during the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer is happening after the events of the Shang-Chi movie. Kevin Feige, a lot of the other producers were also talking about a lot of the cameos and the crossovers, like you have Abomination and Wong showing up during the movie very clearly during the trailers. They said they also considered having the Ant-Man characters show up during the film. I feel like it's not a huge spoiler to say that there are no big Ant-Man characters that show up during the film, even though a good chunk of the film at the beginning takes place in San Francisco. There were a lot of questions about that early on, like we saw the bus chase happening through San Francisco, so people wondered, wait a minute, this is the exact same area where Ant-Man and the Wasp took place. But the way they said it, they wanted to keep the movie relatively self-contained, which gets back to the whole Black Panther of it all. Black Panther did cross over with other Marvel movies. There was some continuity tying it to Captain America Civil War in Avengers Infinity War because that was the next movie happening right after. So you have that White Wolf post-credit scene where Shuri shows up, but they didn't mention Avengers Infinity War during that. So it's very self-contained. The Shang-Chi movie felt like they built it to be that way too. Like, you could watch this movie without having seen some of the other Marvel movies, but there are a lot of Easter eggs and background details tying it to other previous Marvel movies. They even use some footage from other Marvel movies inside this movie. Most of that was in service of paying off the Iron Man Easter eggs in the Iron Man films, the way they talked about the Mandarin during those. If you have been following the Marvel movies since early 2006 when they announced the Iron Man film, they were going to make one and they were building up to the Avengers, Kevin Feige was teasing the Avengers even back in 2006, long before they did the first Iron Man film.
With the new studio setup, the way things work now, is there more of an opportunity for a crossover here and there with Marvel characters in a movie? So say somebody might show up in a Hulk movie down the road.
I think if you listen to the characters I named that we are working on currently, and you put them all together, there's no coincidence that may someday equal the Avengers. I think.
You may remember at that 2006 Comic-Con, he said that they were going to use the Mandarin as the villain of the film, but then when they got into production, famously pivoted and changed it to Obadiah Stane. Since then, they've already kind of answered a lot of those questions, but this film actually does fill in a lot of the gaps. Some really important parts of the Shang-Chi movie are dedicated to filling in those gaps and fixing some of those past mistakes that they made. So I was happy to see that they're trying to explain, no, it was Wen Wu, Tony Leung's version of the Mandarin, this whole time influencing things. He was behind the events of Iron Man 1. It's just you didn't see him till now. Simu Liu was great as the Shang-Chi character. He's one of those actors who can do a lot of the action stuff himself because he's actually really good at martial arts just on his own, but he can also do all the comedic beats and the really heavy drama stuff as well. Marvel really likes their main protagonists to be relatable characters, so they kind of have to be able to wisecrack but also do the heavy stuff as well. And sort of getting to the iron fist of it all, because Marvel did attempt a martial arts project before, but just wound up being a total disaster. No matter how badass the Shang-Chi sequels wind up being, some of you might still have Iron Fist PTSD, but the movie does go a long way to washing that bad taste out of your mouth. Kevin Feige kind of saying to the fans, no, don't worry, we can actually pull this off. We can do a really, really awesome martial arts movie. I feel like it's not a spoiler to say there is no Iron Fist stuff going on during the Shang-Chi movie, but I feel like in the future, a lot of people have speculated that that would be the place to reintroduce that mythology or that character if they want to do a new version of him. Please recast. I'll say right now, just please recast a brand new actor. Like I said, the Shang-Chi movie gets into a whole new mythology, so it doesn't have anything to do with Kunlun or the capital cities of heaven, anything from the Iron Fist comics. I will do my full post-credit scenes video on Friday, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they set up in that. One of the post-credit scenes does tease something larger going on with the 10 Rings of Power. So in the comics, the 10 Rings of Power are made by the McLuhans. They're kind of like space dragons in the Marvel Universe. They don't really do any of the McLuhans during the movie, and they never fully explain all the details about the 10 Rings themselves. You learn that the Mandarin found them thousands of years ago and started using them. They gave him immortality, but they only tease where they come from, this other realm that this group of people comes from. It seems like it might wind up being their version of the McLuhans inside the MCU, but that is one of the big questions that they do not answer, that they're just leaving for the sequels. So I will talk more about what that means when I do my post-credit scene video tomorrow. But when they do get to doing the sequel, I am excited to see how that influences and changes the MCU, but it broadens things in a cosmic way that I was not expecting. When you think of kung fu action movies in the MCU, you tend to think more of ground-level action just because it's a lot of hand-to-hand combat, but the movie does get much bigger, much more cosmic than you're expecting. And speaking of the fight scenes, the action, I've already done a couple videos talking about some of their big fight scenes, and obviously we have that Mortal Kombat-style tournament happening with Wong, the Abomination, and Shang-Chi later in the trailer. The fight choreographer they had in the film was from the Matrix movies. He was also one of Jackie Chan's top men. He wound up passing away after the movie was finished, so it was very unfortunate, but he was a badass fight choreographer. So all the traditional types of fights like hand-to-hand combat, martial arts fights are badass early on. One of the few minor complaints though is that when they get to the third act and things sort of escalate to the more cosmic realm, they start using more of their superpowers to fight, the choreography gets a little bit messier and it's just not quite as exciting as some of the traditional hand-to-hand fights. Most of you on all my trailer videos seem like you're already big fans of Tony Leung from his martial arts movies or other movies that he's done with Wong Kar-wai. Most of the movies he's made have been pretty fantastic. He actually said that this movie is the first time that he actually worked with an American crew on a film. So if you haven't seen any of his films before this, I'd recommend you check them out. He's done both badass martial arts films, but also a lot of really awesome drama films as well. Anything of his from Wong Kar-wai is fantastic, so be sure to watch some of those. The interesting thing about their dynamic, Shang-Chi and the Mandarin during the film, is that it's way more of a family vibe that they've got into in previous villain relationships in Marvel movies. Like before the Shang-Chi movie, I feel like the biggest relationship you see between a villain and their relative family members was during Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame with Thanos and Gamora, like him throwing her off the cliff. That was actually a really powerful moment. But at the time, that was a brand new thing for Marvel. Like, oh, this giant cosmic villain actually has a family that he cares about in a relatable kind of way. Usually that's one of people's biggest complaints against Marvel movies is that the movies are only as strong as the villains, and some of the movies have pretty terribly written villains. The difference with Tony Leung's Mandarin character is that he actually has a genuine arc during the film, start to finish. Like you learn how he became the Mandarin in ancient China thousands of years ago, how the legends about him were spun, how he became this great warlord using the 10 Rings of Power, then how he fell in love, started a family, had Shang-Chi, his sister, how he stopped being the Mandarin for a while, and then why he became the Mandarin again. One of the other post-credit scene teasers gives you an idea for what's going to happen with the future of the 10 Rings organization in the future of the MCU. Like I said, I will talk about that tomorrow when I do my full post-credit scene video. All the supporting cast do a really solid job too. Michelle Yeoh is amazing in pretty much everything that she does, so no big surprise there. The team they put around Simu Liu was great, although there's not a whole lot of his sister in the movie. They kind of hype her up in the trailer as a pretty big character, and she is a pretty big character. They sort of tease that at the end of the film, but a lot of what you see from her in the trailer is about what you get from her in the film. She doesn't have a lot of speaking lines. She just kind of shows up, is really badass for a little while, has some good scenes with him, and then is important for the end of the film, and then you just kind of tease a larger role for her during one of the post-credit scenes. So I'm assuming that when they get to the sequel, she'll be a much bigger character. Even though it seems like Awkwafina is mostly in the film just for comedic relief, their pairing together, her and Shang-Chi together as a comedic pair, actually works pretty well during the film. They actually work as a couple, even though they themselves are not a couple, although they kind of tease that there might be some kind of romantic relationship with them in the future. They play it a little bit like the Iron Man Pepper Potts relationship, only she isn't pining over him the way that Pepper Potts was clearly in love with Tony for a long time before he ever noticed her. Like, imagine a funnier version of Pepper Potts who isn't totally in love with Iron Man at the beginning. It is a much more important part of the plot throughout the film than Pepper Potts was in the first Iron Man film. I was also very happy that they finally explained what happened to Trevor after that one-shot All Hail the King, the Iron Man 3 one-shot. During that, they teased that the real Mandarin is after him for revenge, using his name, creating all this negative attention around the 10 rings. So without getting into huge spoilers, yes, they do answer what happened to Trevor in a satisfying way. Overall, I do feel like it's going to go down as one of the better Marvel movies, like the good half of Marvel movies, because there's so many of them now. Maybe enough to break into my top 10, not quite top 5, like it's not Captain America Winter Soldier good, but it's still a pretty solid movie. My top 5 and my top 10 Marvel movies tend to shuffle after every new Marvel film a little bit, but I do give it a lot of extra points for pushing into this fresh new territory the same way that the Black Panther movie did. Like, here's something brand new that you've never seen before, but that feels like a Marvel movie. So if you have seen the movie, or once you do have a chance to see it, do write your reactions in the comments below. Like I said, my Shang-Chi post-credit scene videos will post tomorrow. I'll do full Easter egg breakdowns this weekend. There is a lot of really exciting stuff that they do set up for the future of the MCU in Avengers 5 during the movie. Speaking of people ignoring Wong's advice, you can click here for my full Spider-Man No Way Home trailer video and Doctor Strange going off the rails in my full What If Episode 4 Dark Doctor Strange episode video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.